Hello, my name is Paul Stockman, a physical therapist here at CRMC, and
I'm Catherine Carpenter. I am the fitness supervisor at the Hallett Center.
so we'll be doing our presentation for you today virtually, and the camera's going to shift to the slideshow now, so we just wanted to say hi and wanted to let you know we were excited to do this and trust it'll be helpful for you.
Yeah,
So,
let's get started.
all right. The book Younger Next Year is something I read a number of years ago, which was really helpful for me in looking at the role of exercise and how I live and wanting to live a better life. And I know this morning when I woke up, I was aware that we were doing this taping today for the presentation for the Living Well series, and I was reflecting on my day yesterday being kind of a tough day, and I had a very distinct sense this morning in getting up that I wanted to restart, just to relook at my day and relook at how I approached things. And on this whole topic of exercise, I hope there's new stuff for you guys within this presentation. And I also realize that the whole process of trying to live better, it really passes through us as human persons, where a lot of times we might know what we need to do, but we need encouragement to get there and the freedom to give ourselves a restart. So it is possible to feel younger next year. This is a great book. It's an easy read and a short read if you would be interested to get in. Much of the information I have is borrowed from that with some incorporation to some other things that I've developed. If we want to get younger next year and what that would feel like, it's possible even into our 70s to feel younger based on the way that we, kind of the information we give our body via movement and exercise. And what it means practically for us is that we have less joint pain, we can have more energy, we're stronger, we're more able to engage in life and more committed to the things that are important to us. Not everything, but some of what we feel and much of what we feel is not related to aging, but more to decay. There are certain immutable and things that we can't reverse related to aging. When I look at my skin, there's a certain quality to my skin which is really not under my influence, but much of what I experience I can influence by exercise. So it really giving us information about how do we take charge of the biology in our lives. And we're structured in a certain way, all of us as persons, through our DNA and the different mechanisms in our body that we can respond to stimuli. When we treat our body in a certain way, it produces a change in us. So it's possible to make the road ahead for all of us radically better and for those around us, because we always live in community. We're with people, and it can be a help to them too. This is a diagram that just kind of looks at the thought related to as we get older, that sometime around 70 we tend to precipitously drop off in our health, and we kind of want to challenge this assumption that we can push this curve out based on the way that we live so that we feel functionally younger, particularly when we kind of hit that retirement age around 65 to 70. There's also a bump on that diagram up at around 50 where it starts to bump down, and that's often a period of time in life too when people in their mid-50s can start to feel a decline in their energy and joint pain and their strength. So aging, decay are not wed. Aging is up to nature, it's irreversible, immutable. Decay is more up to us, and it's not the same as aging. And the greatest risk is a sedentary lifestyle, that we don't move enough. And the good news is this is reversible and within our control. What happens is our body and our brain begin to decay in the absence of signals to grow. And I just coined the term lazy arthritis, a result of a sedentary lifestyle. So the lack of exercise and calories can set the stage for low-grade depression too, where our brain and our body respond negatively. We go into survival mode, and the answer to that is to look at how we move and exercise, that it begins to tell our body it's springtime. It sends messages to grow, repair, just like in the spring when we see the onset of new life with nature around us. This just shows that when our body is in that decay mode, that as we age, there's just a natural progression downward in the way that we feel. And whereas growth is associated with nonlinear activity, and it moves in an upward direction, and that the key thing here is that we have stress balanced by periods of recovery, in which, for instance, if I get home tonight and I go for a vigorous walk for 45 minutes, and then maybe I take the day off tomorrow, so I peak my activity and I take a day of rest. And when we oscillate activity like that, it greatly moves our health in the positive direction. That can also occur during the day too, in small ways, when if we're too sedentary with our work or our daily activities, even changing that activity where we get up and walk for a short period of time, or maybe we do 10 squats up and down from the chair, that oscillation in activity is helpful for us. And I should say, Catherine, if you have anything you want to add, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And with those periods of stress and then rest and recovery, that's essential. Pretty much when you're putting your body through that necessary stress to grow, you need that time to recover, because you do recover a little more each time, and that's how you build that stamina and that strength over time.
Good, thank you. So some of the keys, and Catherine is going to go into more of these later here, but if we want to feel younger, some form of exercise on a routine basis, daily preferably, with that period of rest that Catherine talked about too. Eating reasonably well, staying emotionally committed to those people around us, and also to stay engaged with living, that we give our best to our day and those responsibilities that we have. It does affect us on the DNA level when we exercise. So exercise can produce these enzymes, grow messages that actually cause the DNA to open up. Proteins are transcribed from that. So we actually change the daily expression of our DNA. Probably the most important thing in feeling younger next year would be some form of aerobic exercise. Strength training and some other things can add additional benefits, but the pillar is really to do some form of aerobic exercise. Part of what happens when we exercise with enough intensity or duration is it causes a little bit of microtrauma to the body, and that's going to cause, the microtrauma will cause protein messengers to enter into the bloodstream, which sets in motion a chemical cascade to grow, and it helps our tissues repair. And the structural properties of our tissues and physiological processes are improved. And one of the practical things that we oftentimes start to feel is that we have less pain, more energy, maybe more emotional stability. So this is kind of what I was talking about too when we, back on that slide with the DNA, is that we're structured in a way that our bodies can respond to the information that we give it via exercise and other things. This is an oversimplification, but C6 over on the left, it's a protein messenger cytokine, which is responsible for the constant interaction of maintenance and decay in our bodies. Our skin cells are continually being replaced, and C6 helps monitor that. What happens when we reach a certain age is the maintenance doesn't keep up with the decay as much, and what needs to happen is when we exercise with enough intensity and duration, it causes an increase in that C6 enzyme. For instance, if I'm biking and I do that with sufficient intensity, my quadriceps muscles start to get fatigued. There's a little bit of microtrauma that happens in there. That event will release more of these protein messengers, this C6 protein messenger, which causes the C10 enzyme to be released, which is what's really responsible for helping our bodies to grow, repair, and heal. It is exercise though too, so there's work involved, and I contemplate that for myself too. I don't really like to exercise a lot. I'm mystified by people that like to do that, and yet I know, I verify in my own body what happens when I exercise more consistently. So when I present on this stuff, I do some things, but I also feel like I always come from a perspective of poverty that I oftentimes need to restart, and I don't do as much as I should, and often need encouragement to keep going. So this is just another summary slide that talks about that C6 and C10 interaction. Long rhythmic exercise being the tide of youth and the opposite of the chronic inflammation of modern living. You want to try to get into a 65% target heart range. That's kind of where our brain and our body heal. And it's C10 that really drives the growth of mitochondria, capillary beds, articular cartilage regenerations. And it also helps cause a swing in our body chemistry. We tend to feel better. This is just for your reference to look at a target heart range, plug in your age and then into there, and then timesing it times either 65 to 85%. Do you have anything to add on this one at all or not? Or?
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Perfect.
A more casual gauge of the different intensities of exercise.
Perfect.
So you don't have to do the math in the moment.
Perfect. That sounds good. Thanks. I threw this stuff in here too related to emotional commitment. The book talks about this, that our physical bodies need the stress of exercise to cause that change in our health, that we're structurally wired in that way. And it also talks about our emotional health too being under the influence of DNA and protein messengers, and we're structured in a way too that to stay emotionally committed to those people around us helps us live better. And sometimes that can be kind of traumatic too. When I think of maybe a conversation that's challenging with my spouse or one of my kids or a coworker, sometimes my natural desire is just to bury it, and then that doesn't generally lead to any growth. It generally leads to decay, versus staying emotionally committed means investing in that relationship and trying to seek peace again or some type of an understanding so that we can continue to grow and build. So there's this tremendous interplay too, how sometimes to exercise well, it influences the chemicals that make us feel better. That can help us have more energy or resolve to address relationship things too. And then the other thing too is just to stay engaged with our living, in feeling younger next year, to have a purpose and something that we're really passionate about, that we can really give ourselves fully. It helps us as people. And there's just a quote from the article, The Making of a Corporate Athlete. The energy unleashed by tapping into one's deepest values and defining a sense of purpose. This capacity serves as sustenance in the face of adversity and as a powerful source of motivation, focus, determination, and resilience. Having a purpose helps us respond to the heroic moments, and I feel like we have those a lot during the day. Sometimes they're small things, but they still require kind of a heroic decision or a sacrifice. Sometimes I think about I need to do what love requires for the people around me. Arthritis is a pretty common finding in a lot of people. We can't reverse arthritis. I think about arthritis like the chocolate that would cover a pretzel. The chocolate would be the articular cartilage that lines our joints, and the pretzel would be the bone. And as arthritis advances, initially it'd be kind of like licking the chocolate on a pretzel, and then the next stage would be maybe you take a little nibble out of it, and then third stage would be you take a little more nibbling and licking off of it, and kind of that third to fourth stage of arthritis, you might be able to start to see the bone coming through there, or with the chocolate and pretzel analogy, you'd start to see the pretzel. So we can't put additional layers of chocolate on, but whatever is there, we can get healthier. And cartilage relies on movement for its nutrition to stay healthy. And as Catherine was mentioning too, if you have arthritic joints, regular exercise helps, and then also balancing kind of that, stressing the joints and then recovery, that maybe you do legs one day and then you relax the next day, and maybe you do arms instead. And it's really light, low impact things on joint surfaces with movement that help. So when we think about knee arthritis, osteoarthritis in the knee and pain, this is just a pictorial of what happens with the knee. You can imagine maybe being on a bike there, where you get this rolling and gliding in the knee joint. So those cartilage surfaces are moving past each other under some degree of load, and that's the stimulus to cause that articular cartilage, the chocolate, to get healthier. And it improves the joint environment. You get more homeostasis. So if a person bikes for 15 minutes at 60 RPM, your knee's going to be going through 900 cycles or it bends and straightens with light pressure on it, which can greatly help. This is just, when we think about trying to feel functionally younger, we have to, like a medication, the dosage has to be right. If we do too little of exercise, it's not going to be a sufficient stimulus to trigger our bodies to change. If we do too much, like a medication overdose, that it's going to make our joints and tissues more irritable. We'll have decreased ability to kind of function during the day. So this is going to be unique to every person. I mean, there's some general principles you can follow, but finding that therapeutic range in which it stresses our bodies enough to get us healthier without breaking us down.
In terms of this as well, it can be related back to the psychology behind behavior change. We have a very similar diagram. It has 3 overlapping circles. It's the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and then the stress zone. And so you want to keep yourself in that middle zone where you are pushing yourself. You feel a little bit challenged, but psychologically, if you get yourself too much into that stress zone every time, it's going to condition your brain to associate the activity negatively, so you're going to feel less like you want to do it. So it's also important psychologically to get yourself in that therapeutic stretch range as well.
That's a good idea. And probably if we haven't been exercising much, it's probably better to err on the side of underdosage to kind of avoid that negative experience.
I always say start with something that you know you can achieve.
Yeah.
That way you get that positive reinforcement right away, and then as you gain confidence, you can add in a little more,
Yeah.
a little more.
That's a good, excellent point. So just to kind of some summary things here, being functionally younger is an option for us. Encouragement just to if you're doing something, keep going. If you haven't, start in earnest with sincerity and start simply, kind of even like what Catherine mentioned there. I think it's super helpful to partner with someone. I'm thinking of myself too. There's a few of us that have started biking on Saturday mornings, and it's been so helpful to have that on my calendar. And I work much harder on that day because I'm with people, and there's just a great, it's just easier to, if you can, to partner with somebody. We're more likely to stay successful on it. Stay consistent with what you commit to on your exercise. And just that whole question too, we have a desire to live well, and all of you are going through this living well class, so that desire is in us, and just encourage you to make that road ahead for yourself and those around you better by beginning some of this stuff.
So first I'm going to talk a little bit about strength building. So as we talked about it before, we have strength exercises and we have cardiovascular exercises. So to build strength, when starting a new strength regimen, you want to start with very low weights or no weight added. I do want to emphasize throughout this that when you're starting a new behavior change or a pattern of physical activity that you have not done before, anybody can be physically active. It can go all the way from somebody that is chair bound to somebody who has been exercising their whole life. So don't think that you have to jump into a gym and start lifting weights. You can start out of a chair. You can start with just using your body weight. You can start in the water with less than your body weight. So this really is adaptable to any body type. You do want to separate zones of the body into upper and lower body days. You don't want to repeat the same zone twice in a row or within about 48 hours of each other. That's going to put your body into that stress zone that we talked about earlier. If you are very sore, take an extra rest day. It is that simple. Drink lots of water. That will help reduce inflammation in your body. And you want to start with about 8 to 10 repetitions of an exercise for 3 to 5 sets. If you are not doing very heavy weight, you can also go higher reps as well. And you want to make sure you warm up and cool down with light stretching and walking before and after workouts. This will just make sure you're able to cycle your body into the workout, and at the end of your workout, it will make sure your blood pressure does not drop too quickly, because then you can get things like lightheadedness. So just some example of a lower body strength building exercise. And in this, again, I would say do each exercise 8 to 10 reps for 3 to 5 sets. And of course, you've stretched and you've walked to warm up for this. So you can do either a weighted squat or a chair squat. So with a weighted squat, you would be holding weights. The example I put in this presentation would be the chair squat. That way, if you lose your balance, that chair is behind you, so you don't have to worry about it too much. So you're just going to squat down to about chair height. You're going to keep your shoulders down and away from your ears, and you're going to try to keep your chest up as you squat. You can also do a knee lift with a medicine ball. This is another one that can be done seated. It's almost like a seated march. And this also does help stabilize your core and work balance as well. Then we've got a side leg lift. Again, this can be done with weights on a cable machine. It can be done just with your body weight, holding on a chair for balance, or it can be done with resistance bands with a chair. So again, every single exercise that we talk about or we do has countless adaptations for ability. And then we have a hamstring curl. She's using a resistance band again, but again, you can use a cable machine, you can use just body weight, and you can have that chair in front of you for balance.
These are excellent slides. I was thinking one of the known predictions of increased risk of fall is a decrease in lower extremity strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things that you outlined here are great for increasing power and strength and helping reduce the risk of fall.
Yeah. So for balance, it is important to add in functional balance movement as well for day-to-day life activities. This can include things like bathtub steps. What a bathtub step looks like is almost like you're trying to get on a horse or into a bathtub. You're lifting that leg up, your knee up to your chest, high, over to the side and out. And you do that on both sides. You can also do toe to heel walks. There's lots of balance exercises. A lot of it has to do with stability of all of our little tendons and muscles in our lower body and our core. But those will help with day-to-day activities as well and decreasing that fall risk. So cardiovascular, adults ages 65 and over, just as kind of a simplified general rule, need about 2.5 hours of moderate cardio a week. Moderate cardio includes activities like brisk walking or swimming, or you can do 1.5 hours of vigorous activity a week. This includes activities like jogging or anything where it's difficult to maintain a conversation. Now, this does not mean that you should only be moving 2.5 hours a week. You should absolutely make sure that you're getting up and walking during the day. This is that kind of exercise where you can feel that you're pushing yourself. So if you don't feel like taking your pulse, like we were talking about earlier, or doing that math, as kind of a simplified general rule, the 3 levels of activity are light, moderate, and vigorous. So when you're doing light exercise, that's just a gentle walk. Think of it in styles of how you can keep a conversation. So light exercise, you would have no trouble talking. You can keep a conversation. It's not difficult to shoot it back and forth with somebody and chat with them. Moderate cardio or moderate exercise, you can still keep a conversation, but you might have to take a couple breaths in between responding. It might be just a little bit more difficult to maintain that conversation. And then vigorous exercise, you're having a really hard time keeping it going back and forth. It's not very easy to talk. You really have to focus on your breathing. So that would be kind of a more simplistic gauge of what level of activity you're at. So as we were talking about earlier, one of your slides said, find your thing. Exercise does not have to be going to a gym, picking up a weight, and if that's not your thing, being bored for half an hour. I know you mentioned that's very difficult for you to do exercise that way. So I always recommend combining physical activity with either leisure or recreation. For example, if you want to do walking as your chosen form of exercise, you don't have to go into a gym and walk on a treadmill. You can take up an activity like birding. I really actually enjoyed birding during all the quarantine that we had. I used to roll my eyes at the activity, and I have a whale of a time with it now. I'll go out for hours and walk 5 miles and not even realize how far I'm walking because I'm just following a bird. You can study the native plants in an area. You can also be creative. There are modifications for all types of bodies, all physical activity types. Just find something that works for you. Paddling is amazing for your core. They have all types of adaptive boating. And I have an outdoor recreation background, so a lot of mine is focused on getting outside because there are a lot of benefits to getting outside as well. That can be a little difficult here in the winter, but embrace the weather while we're here.
You like to exercise.
I do. I really do.
That's good. Just a plug too for the Walk with the Doc that leaves from the Hallett Center every Wednesday at 4:30 too. So that's another time too to get out and kind of see the area and walk with different people at different levels.
Yes, and I know a lot of people bring their dogs with them. I think some people even have brought a cat and like a baby stroller.
Yep.
It's been interesting. And yeah, that brings up that form of community you mentioned as well, where you have other people there. You're held accountable. You have it on your schedule every week. And I think community is something that we've all kind of been lacking in the last year or so. So it's nice to be outside where there's a little bit less restriction. Nutrition. So nutrition plays a huge role. We won't go into it too much. So I'll just touch on it a little bit. So just make sure that when you are incorporating these behavior changes, you're eating enough during the day. You need to have a balanced diet that includes protein, carbs, and fat sources. You need to be eating enough protein because that will fuel your muscles and help reduce soreness after your workouts. And then you also, again, need to make sure you're drinking enough water during the day. Some things you want to avoid in terms of nutrition, unless they are prescribed to you by a medical professional for a issue that you deal with specifically, are elimination diets, any products that advertise as a detox. That is your body's job. Your body's pretty good at maintaining homeostasis. You don't need to buy a special tea for it. Large calorie deficits, that's going to make you sore, tired, put your body in that stress zone, and you're not going to feel like exercising. And anything that's a quick fix. If you are looking at a pattern of living and you're like, oh, I can only do this for a month. I only have to do this for 2 weeks. It's not going to help you long term. What you're doing, you should be able to see yourself doing for the indefinite future. It should be enjoyable enough to do it. So, just a little psychology background, getting started with motivation and determination. So, self-determination theory, that pretty much, to simplify it, is how we make decisions and how we value decisions. That has to do with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation are those external things. As Paul was saying, you have a social group that counts on you to be there. You sign up for a 5K and you get a t-shirt and maybe an award. Those little work programs that you have. Intrinsic motivations are those benefits that come from inside. Why do you want to do it solely for your benefit? Is because you want to change the way you look, you want to change the way you feel, your general stress levels. Those are going to be those intrinsic motivations. So we won't go through all of this, but again, this is a diagram that represents the power of motivation and whether. So it starts with a motivation, which is you don't feel like you can make a change. You don't want to make a change. That happens with inactivity. This can be because of fear of failure, or maybe you just don't feel well. Extrinsic motivation comes after that. It's kind of the middle ground in terms of what kind of motivation is compelling, and those are those external rewards. And then intrinsic motivation, why you want to do it, that's what you want to focus on because that's the most compelling form of motivation. That's going to make you want to do the behavior change in activity. Accountability. Again, you want to make sure you're holding yourself accountable. This can include journaling, group workouts, accountability partners, personal training. So as you were saying with your wife, you enjoy having that kind of accountability for you. And then with groups.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it can be like, well, I don't want to do it today.
Exactly right.
But that's why you have it. Group workouts, you have that social aspect. Again, with self-determination theory, the social aspect is a huge part of that. You have a community. You have people that you can go to for support, or even if you're not somebody that likes to ask for help, just kind of knowing that they're there, they're going through the same thing, definitely helps. So a little push for the Hallett Center, back to that group atmosphere aspect. We do have group classes available to all members Monday through Thursday. We have Balanced Fit, which is a class that focuses primarily on balance, and that helps reduce fall risk, that helps you be more autonomous, able to kind of do things on your own, and will lead into being able to advance in those strength exercises we talked about. We also have Fit Over 50. That is more of a cardiovascular and strength building class. And again, every exercise that our instructor shows you, she will come up with different modifications for it. So if you're going into there and you don't want to use the dumbbells and you want to be in the chair, but other people are using dumbbells, don't worry about it. Everybody starts somewhere. We have all levels of ability within that class. And then we also have Aquafit. Aquafit is in our pool, and that is on Tuesday and Thursday as well. That is a great class if you are worried about balance and falling, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get wet. You're in the water. It is also a killer cardiovascular exercise. I used to have my own opinions about Aquafit, and then after I taught a few classes, I said, wow, this really whips you into shape. I'm sweating by the end of it. We do have individual training available as well, and we will be adding a spin class and a flexibility class soon.
I did the balance fitness class too.
You did?
I did, yeah, and that was a workout too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Catherine, for doing this together.
Yeah, thank you.
And, well, feel younger next year. We really enjoyed doing this with you guys. We wish we could be in person.
Yeah.
It's hard to connect, but this is the best we could do, so.
I do love talking about it as well, so I think they're going to include our contact information. And if you have any questions about what the Hallett Center offers, or just any questions based on behavior change or accountability or the program that we put on today, go ahead and feel free to contact me.
That's great. Yeah, and likewise. Glad to do so. Thank you.